Were Eloin's rates nerfed a couple weeks ago? In general, is the 15x actually working in this game? These are big, weighty questions. I actually think I have the answers, but they are quite confusing. There's a lot of stats, a lot of assumptions, a lot of data, and a lot of math for me to explain. It's not actually that complicated, but it's just kind of a lot of number salad. So essentially, in this video, I want to answer the question, does the 15x really work? The answer is kind of yes, kind of no, it's kind of BS. And also, basically, more simply, are you getting screwed? And again, the answer is kind of yes, kind of no. If you want all the information, I have a ton of stats, a ton of numbers, again, kind of like number salad, a ton of math. It's gonna be boring to a lot of you, without a doubt. So essentially what I wanna do is I'm gonna put a timestamp on the screen right now, and after I finish this little intro, you can just skip to that if you just want to skip all the math and just get to the results, the conclusions, the big takeaways, and essentially how I think this works and what it means for you. If you don't know where any of this is coming from, Eloin seemed to not be dropping at what would feel like a 15x rate. I did a study on it. We actually recorded 2,129 legendaries pulled, 384 Eloins. This was over 811 individual submissions. So this really is like nothing to scoff at. It was if it wasn't perfect statistical significance, it was quite close. And you can see, we saw she was dropping at an 18% rate. If we go to this sheet over here with my calculated rates and weights when there is no rate up in the game, you would see a rare bucket hero, and we'll get deep into this when I actually get into the math. A hero like Eloin, like that, would have an expected rate of 1.06%. So this was all the way up to 18%, at least from our study. If we go back to the January 24th 10x on Eloin and Anai, this was with less heroes in the game back then, and it was a 10x, not a 15x, even though you're gonna see 10x and 15x when it comes to rare bucket heroes. So not common bucket heroes like Abomination, Allura, Absent, but the rare ones like Arrogance and Constance, Hex, that is total BS. There's no pure application of 10x happening, 15x happening, nothing like that. In many ways, it's a lot better, but that's because the base rates are absolutely so terrible. But you would see during this 10x rate up, she was at 16.86%. So a fairly marginal improvement going all the way from a 10x back in January 24th to less than a month ago this past August with a 15x, which should be 50% stronger, right? Going from 10 to 15, that should be a 50% improvement. Certainly we did not see that. There are a lot of reasons for it. There's a lot of weirdness in how rate up banners actually work in this game. As you will see here, as I methodically and very pedantically go through all this information, again, there's a ton of math, a ton of statistics, a lot of numbers, a fair amount of assumptions that I have to make since we have not got any pure confirmed raw game data from the game file since last March 2024. So without further ado, if you want to skip ahead, here's that timestamp again above my head. And if you want to know all the numbers, all the stats, all of that sweet nitty gritty, buckle up and let's get into it.
Fastidious.
Fastidious.
All right, you frickin' nerds that did not skip ahead, thank you for sticking with me. I'll try to be as fast and clear as possible. I can only do my best. Let's get into it. So the way rates, when there's no rate up in this game, work, the way it all happens is each hero has an assigned probability weight, like a probabilistic weight. Essentially what that is each hero has their own weight depending on how rare they are. You add up all those weights, you get a total weight. So this is of all, we're looking at normal heroes here. So the heroes with their respective rates and weights for normal summons. So rare summoning crystals and legendary divine summoning crystals, the rates and weight are completely different for ancient summoning crystals. So this is speaking just to our normal summons. They all have their respective weights. You add them up, you get the total weight, and then to find any specific rate, you divide that individual hero's weight by the total weight, and that gives you the rate, which is essentially just the relative weight, but out of 100. That's how you get a percentage, right? So you can see the rarest heroes in the game are our rare lords, which interestingly enough are Leia and Morgan. Then we've got Hotsit, who's not a lord, but she's in a class of her own as a ultra rare legendary hero. Then we've got our common lords. Then we have, and this is where it gets important to what we're going to be going over in this video as we talk about rate ups on rare and common legendaries. We have the base weights and rates of our rare bucket legendaries, so heroes like Arrogance, Constance, Eloin, Hex, so on and so on. And then we have our common bucket legendaries. So these are there are some good ones in here, but these are like our mid disappointing legendaries a lot of the times, and they're far more common. So Abomination through Zealous. You get the picture, right? So to set the stage so we can expand our knowledge, we need to know where a lot of my assumptions are going to come from. And that's coming from back in the day before the devs kind of closed the door on us, sealed us away from all the good information, when we used to be able to get direct data from the game file. And huge shout out to T, who is the direct source for all of this. He did an amazing job decompiling some stuff and allowing us back in the day to have access to all of this. We have been closed off since the end of March 2024, so literally like half a year now. So since then, I've had to make assumptions based off of the old information we had. I think they're pretty good assumptions, but it is worth mentioning they are assumptions nonetheless. So if we go first to this January 24th 10x on Elwyn and Anai, you will see this is how typically the rate ups in this game manifest. It used to be 10x, it's 15x now, but when it comes to our rare bucket legendaries, the legendaries in question, the Elwyns of the world, you will see never was there a pure, proper, accurate 10x, and still now there almost certainly, without a doubt, is no proper 15x. In a lot of ways, this helps us, as you will see as I go through it, but this is because their base rates are such garbaggio trash. So let's go through it. You'll see these are all the same weights. They're slightly different than you're going to see over here. That's only because the classes have expanded, the rarity classes. We have more rare bucket heroes and we have more common legendary bucket heroes. Nothing has changed with our normal summons with the lords, but you will see, besides new heroes being added, some things have moved around. We know 100% because this happened back in March. Silas and Comet, for example, were moved into the rare legendary bucket. Their rates were drastically reduced. And anecdotally, to my knowledge and from a decent amount of research, I think Valkyra was moved as well. So you'll see that shift here. Those heroes like Comet, like Silas, like Valkyra used to be in that common bucket. Aside from that, the only changes are we have more new heroes now. So if we look at this old example from, at this point, almost 9 months ago, January the 24th, you will see this is how it manifested. Essentially, there were the common standard rates you'd expect for each hero rarity bucket, all basically holding true besides the shifts in heroes moving around. And then what they did was they would apply a direct 10x to the weight on the common bucket legendary if there was one in the rate up, and then the rare legendary would have a random proportional rate up decided post fact. Honestly, very arbitrary. The number we see consistently, and you'll see this in 1 second on the 10x 2 weeks after this one, the Element and I one for Hex and Fasti, just arbitrarily was decided to be 81%. So let's explain this really cleanly. We have our base rates. These are something we've established now. The common bucket legendaries back then were 7.02. So when they did a 10x rate up, Anai, as the common bucket legendary that was on rate up, would just get a 10x multiplier on that. So her weight, instead of being about 7, was 70. You got a 10x multiplier on it. But then for Elwyn, quite obviously, she did not get a 10x on her tiny rate that should be for a rare bucket legendary of 2.47. That would put her at a weight of only 24.7. So I'll quickly type that in and you'll see she would have just a completely trash rate of just over 8%. This would be blatantly obvious to the players that the true base rates are so low. So instead, what they do is they do a proportional rate up. So if a full strength rate up is what Anai is getting, they take that number, they multiply it by 81%, or they apply a 0.81x multiplier on it, and that's how you get this number over here. So quite frankly, you will see it right now. I'll do it for you. If you take the arbitrary rate they gave Elwyn, 16.86%, divide it by the true 10x they applied to Anai, you will get 81%. You will see the same arbitrary rate up manifest on the Hex Fasti banner 2 weeks later in the beginning of February. Sorry, I just had to go check the dates because the 24th of January was not feeling right for Elwyn and Anai. I remembered it right after New Year's. I checked, it was actually January 3rd. Hex Fasti was on January the 24th. So you'll see 3 weeks later, exactly after the Elwyn and Anai banner we just went over, we got the Hex Fasti 10x, and there was the same arbitrary proportional rate up on the rare hero, Hex, in proportion to the common hero, Fasti, who was also a new hero. So that's why these weights are slightly different. One new hero entered the pool, that being Fasti. But if we look down, you'll see Fasti was that rate up at 20.32. You'll see a direct 10x was applied to the common rate now, 6.77. So he came out to 67.7. And then Hex is this arbitrary 54.53. And again, I'll show you the math so quickly. That is literally, it's 80.5%, but you'll see if you just round it down to an integer, we've got 81%. Same thing as before, right? So they're applying this arbitrary multiplier on it to bring the rare legendary on rate up to an acceptable, palatable level. Because obviously, again, if you directly applied the 10x to Hex, it would be super low. If we did something like this and made it 24.8, he'd be again just over 8%. So they basically double that. They do this arbitrary thing where it's 81% of what the common legendary is getting, and we're left with this number, 16.36%. If you go through for a long time, all of the rate ups on rare legendaries from back in the day was kind of neutralizing this 16 to 16.5% range. So how can this be applied to whatever the heck is happening in the game now? Well, we have a couple theories. There's 3 scenarios I want to take you through. First off, we have this study theory, and this will be a direct application of this proportional 81% thing I just broke down here, and then exactly what we saw from this study with 2,129 legendaries accounted for, 384 elements, where element came in at 18%, rounded off to 18% flat. So using those numbers, this is the first scenario I calculated for you. So using the rates and weights we know when there are no rate up, we can use our base rates for everything. We can put that all in here, and then we can apply the effective rate ups. So the first way I'm going to do this is we're going to hold Eloin at a strict 18%, right? So we use that 18%. Now we have what we found from our study, her rate up to have been. From that, we can extrapolate the weight. And then for Anai, we're just going to directly use our 81% proportional rate up. So we're going to take this number or take this weight, instead of multiplying it by 0.81 or 81%, we will divide it by that. And that grows our number to 9309, giving Anai a rate up of 22.2%. Now we can see how much of an improvement was this for Eloin. So her old rate up on the 10x from January the 3rd was 16.86%. We now see, as it goes to 18%, a 7% improvement. Key thing to note, as we're going to go through this a few times in all the scenarios, this is not an additive improvement. It's not like it went from 16.86 to 23.86. This is multiplicative. This is saying it was 7% stronger than it was before. So it goes from 16.86 to 18%. We would have expected, and again, this isn't so mathematical, but this is just, I think, why there's such a disconnect with the player base. You see it goes from 10x to 50% higher, right? From 10 to 15 is a 50% improvement. That's what you expect. So with that expected 50% improvement, you would like to see the rate go up by 50%. So that would be, if you did a 1.5x multiplier on 16.86, it would be 25.29%. Obviously, this is a big reason, I think, in people's guts that they were disappointed. Now let's very quickly go through how these rate ups can actually be calculated in terms of a blank X, a 10X or 15X, using the numbers we have. I've done this for every single one, as you see. We're not going to break it down for each one just for the interest of time until the end, because I actually have the results here with all 4 examples. The old version, the study theory I'm showing you right now, then a pure Anai 15X, and a traditional application. So using this study theory, the first one we're starting with, these are the rate ups we found. Now using the base rate, these are the rates that can be taken from my rates and weights over here. These are the expected normal rates when there is no rate up banner. We can just take this 22.2 for Anai, divide it by the 2.7 base rate, and you can see the multiplier actually being applied to Anai relative to her true base rate is only an 18.22x multiplier. Eloin, however, because this base rate is so dirt low, you'll see it's a very strong multiplier based off of the base rate. It's 17.05x, so above a 15x. So this is why I was saying kind of yes, kind of no. We're getting screwed inherently because the rare heroes have such low rates in this game. However, the rate up, really no matter how you spin it, is better than what they actually say. And it has to be. It should be a lot better in my opinion, but it has to be some level of better than the 15x or the 10x like it used to be, because that would be such a small improvement based on what we expect since those base rates are so low. So that's what we get here, but then you can see with a cleaner application, what is the multiplier now relative to the bucket rate? So once you apply the boosted rates, the boosted weights to the rated up heroes in question, in this case, Eloin and Anai, what does that multiplier relative to their respective bucket rate look like? So if we look over here, after all manifests, when we get the different weights in there, the bucket rate for the rares was 0.66. The bucket rate for the commons was 1.68. So now we can calculate those relative multipliers based on their respective bucket. So Anai, we take the 22.2% divided by 1.68. She actually was on a 13.22x multiplier, so slightly less than the traditional or the pure 15x you'd expect, just directly applying that multiplier to her base weight, of her class, of her common legendary bucket class. And then Elowen is 18.00% divided by 0.66. Very strong now, 27.45x. That is far higher than a 15x. But again, this high number is on the back of how low this base rate number is and these base weights are for the rare bucket legendary rarity class. So now we got two more scenarios. Let me take you through them very quickly. This one I'm going to call pure 15x Anai. This is a combination of what I just went over with the theory of the study, the 18%, and then what I articulated with the Hex and Pharisee from January and the Elowen and Anai from January, when there's a direct 10x back in the day, now 15x, applied to the weight of the common bucket legendary. Are you still with me?
No. Wait.
So what's going on here? In this scenario, I held Elowen constant at 18%. However, Anai, I made her weight and thus her rate a pure 15x. So I took this number here, the base rate for the common legendaries, and just multiplied it by 15. So simple as that. 15 times 7.04, boom, 105.6. There you have it. So from that, Elowen is obviously still 18%, but her weight is lower because Anai's higher, and we're holding Elowen's rate constant. And then Anai, with the higher weight, she's got the higher rate. Lots of rhyming here with weights and rates. And you can see her old rate up at 16.8%. We're still seeing that 7% improvement because it's 18% held constant. The expected improvement, again, 50%. Expected rate much higher, over 1.25. And there you go. The proportional rate up now, though, you'll see is down to 74% strength for Elowen, as opposed to the 81% we were taking before based on our past examples. We'll go over all these numbers, but you will see the multiplier relative to the base rate obviously is identical because we held the rate up rate constant at 18%, and obviously the base rate remains constant at 1.06, and then the multiplier relative to the bucket slightly higher. Let's now wrap this up before the results and the conclusions with the traditional application. This is what I think is actually happening. And in this case, I am not holding true to the 18% found from the study, but instead I am just applying the logic used in this January 3rd Elowen and Anai banner and the January 24th Hex and Pharisee banner. So what am I talking about? We are taking Anai, we are applying the direct 15x, the pure 15x I described previously. So taking the 704, multiplying by 15, we get 105.6. And then we are holding this proportional rate up constant. So instead of sticking with Elowen at 18%, we're taking this number here, the 23.9 or the 105.6, however you want to think about it, multiplying it by 81% or applying a 0.81x multiplier. And from that, we get these numbers. So this is our new weight at 85.54. And then the rate for Elowen is actually higher than we observed from our study at 19.36%. Why do I think this is what's actually happening? Well, this is a 1.36% difference, actually slightly less. If you look over here, the observed rate up was actually 18.04. I just rounded it down to 18 for some nice cleaner numbers. But this is well within the margin of error that we would have expected. So it's possible with random bad luck or maybe some amount of human error where people who had worse luck were more likely to report, the numbers could have been suppressed a bit. This is what I think is actually happening. So they're just holding it true exactly as they always have. A strict rate up applied to the common bucket legendary. So you take the common rate, you apply the rate up. So in this case, 15x, and then this arbitrary 80% or 81% multiplier, reduction to the rare rate with respect to the common bucket legendary rate, but huge boost or buff given how low the base rate typically is. You know, if we look over here in this example, it's 0.62% for the non-rated up rare bucket legendary heroes. So if we take this number and we go over here, you'll see this is where we see our strongest multipliers, 18.34x for Elowen on the multiplier relative to the base rate, and then over 30x at 31.1x with the multiplier relative to that bucket rate. So these are final results. You can take a peek at it if you're interested. This is kind of what we're looking at. Essentially, big multipliers. So this is the good news when it comes to our rare bucket legendaries. So typically on these banners, we see exceptions on banners like Lust and Arrogance or Silas and Virna, where they're doing two good rare bucket legendaries together. Then the rates are really arbitrary. But typically we get these boosted rates for our rare bucket legendaries because we're getting pure or hard multiplier rate ups on the common. And then you get this arbitrary rate down relative to that for the rare legendaries. All right, this is the timestamp where you guys are joining me once again. You missed a lot of numbers, a lot of math. I think a lot of you shouldn't lose sleep over it. Hopefully some of you stuck with me to the end. What is the takeaway? Were Elowen's rates nerfed? Yes, I would say. Her base rate, it's impossible to know, but the actual manifestation of how the 15x is working is far weaker than we would like to expect. they've held this arbitrary thing in place where essentially there is a pure rate up, at least the way they choose to apply it, using the base weight and thus base rate of whatever common bucket legendary is on a banner. So something like Anai is the common to Eluin, or Faircy is the common to Hex on 2 recent banners we've seen. And then they just kind of find the rate randomly off of that. The pure rate up is really high. As you'll see, these numbers are higher than 15x. If you look at the dark gray and all of these, higher than 15x. That is quite strong, but that is because the base rates for our rare bucket legendary class of heroes are so immensely low. So in one respect, you can think that they have buffed the rate up. However, relative to what we would expect if they had higher base rates, or if they had a more calculated, less arbitrary way of deciding what the actual number is, I think we would expect them to be stronger. In the end, I would say, are we getting like straight up robbed? No, but I think this is again a beautiful example of how the lack of transparency in this game is like hurting the players, or at least the relationship the player experiences with the developer, with the game. I would like to conclude this by saying I highly encourage Moonton, the developers, Watcher of Realms, to be more transparent about this stuff. I actually don't think any of these numbers are a bad thing. I think at its core, and I guess this is good news, the numbers, the rate ups are solid enough, but people will continually be getting disappointed, be rage quitting, because they are not transparent, and the way they are presented in the game, on the surface, you'd expect them to be far stronger. As you can see, a couple things are manifesting to be stronger than we would even see in the game and expect, but that's because the rates are so much lower for our rare legendary heroes than we would hope, than we would expect, than we would ever think. So in one way, we're totally screwed because the base rates are so low. In another way, the rate ups are actually stronger than 15x. I know it's a weird takeaway. I know there was a lot of math. I know there was a lot of stats, a lot of numbers. I had to make some assumptions. I think they were strong ones. If you have any specific thoughts about this, anything you want to contribute, definitely check out my Discord, the Fast and the Fastidious, or hit me up in the comments. I'd love to read through it. This is how 15x or rate ups in this game actually work. The big takeaway, in many ways, they are actually better than stated than a 15x, for example. However, they feel so much worse because the starting point is so much lower, so much more brutal than you would ever think to expect it to be. There's no other way to put it. It's rough in these streets. I hope this answers some of your questions. I know this was a dense ass video. I absolutely did my best. A huge thank you to R-Type for editing this. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to see more math, just let me know. I'm doing my best out here. This was an extremely hard video to film. I hope you liked it. Share with your mother. I've been Fastidious, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.
Fastidious.